Hello everyone, this is part 26 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Shizune strode into the room, carefully, afraid to disturb the patient if he was sleeping. To her delight he was not. Oh, you're awake, finally. How are you feeling? She asked with a bright smile adorned over her face. Kankuro lay in the bed, slowly flexing his arms, treasuring each moment he now had with renewed feeling in his limbs. Yay, he said with a small smile. It looks like the operation succeeded, eh? He said watching as she entered the room and walked to the side of his bed. Looks like it, she replied, but before we can call it a complete success I'm gonna have to do a few tests, to make sure everything is working properly and all that, you know. Kankuro nodded. Okay then. Shizune began pulling up a chair. Lay back and put your hands at your side please. She ordered and received his compliance. Now, move your right thumb. Good, now your right index finger. He did so, with her jotting down notes on the clipboard. It continued like that for a few more minutes with Shizune poking and prodding at his arms, testing reflexes, grip strength, dexterity, basic coordination, advanced coordination, fast hand movements, complex hand movements, and finally a combination of the two, which was basically doing hand seals very quickly. In the end Shizune nodded with a smile. Well, you have a clean bill of health. With a day or so's rest you won't need to worry about your arm movements ever again. Kankuro nodded with his own smile. Thank you Shizune-san, you've really been great during my stay here, you and Tsunade-sama. Shizune smiled brightly but soon her own face took a mildly somber tone as she reached for an item behind the door, wheeling it in she placed it next to Kankuro's bed. So, would you like to go out? Kankuro eyed the mechanism that he would use to get around for the rest of his life, his face soon gaining his own downtrodden expression before he huffed with a smile. Why not? White walls suck, eh? Shizune smiled herself, feeling a spark of admiration for the Suna ninja's optimism and bravery. Not everyone took it this well. She helped him ease himself into the chair, positioning his legs safely, before she headed out towards the hallway, heading for the exit. So, she began. Where would you like to go? Kankuro didn't even hesitate as he looked up at her with a smile on his face. Do you have a workshop nearby? The song of crickets and small creatures of the night prevailed over the silence of Konoha's nightlife. Lights were strewn about the village, keeping the shadows cast by the overhead moon at bay. The forests were silent even with their variety of animal populations inhabiting them. The silence was almost eerie really even for a ninja village. In a large, strangely designed estate almost half a mile beyond the village gates two women could be seen making their way through the hallways. One, regal and poised, precision marking her every move. White eyes, half-lidded with an almost bored-like apathy. Staring at the back of the second woman. This one with blonde hair, allowed to travel down her back freely, no longer set in her signature four-pig-tailed style. Temari paused in her step, sighing as she rubbed the bridge of her nose. It was only 9 and she was quite literally of boredom cooped up in this house. There were only so many days she could handle just reading in that library. She'd entertained herself fairly well with counting how many possible exits this place had, how many guards were detailing her, how many cleaning ladies were assigned to the house, how many items she could use as impromptu weapons. Which were not many, surprising given how large the house was. Now that she'd done all that in the near month that she'd been trapped in here she didn't have anything else to do. Before at least the impending encounters with Konoha's cage loomed over her shoulder to keep her on her toes but now she was just from the fact that there was nothing to do. Looking over her shoulder she glanced at Hinata from the corner of her eyes. Could you at least walk next to me? This whole goddess is becoming really dull. When Hinata stayed in her place, 2 steps back and 1 to the left, the Suna girl sighed in frustration. Come on, there are dozens of guards in this place. You can K me with a tap to the sea and Mr. Big Bad and Homicidal isn't here to breathe down your end for breaking protocol or whatever. Again Hinata stayed in her place, making Temari sigh. She stopped however when she saw the raven hair from the corner of her eyes. Glancing to the side, she saw Hinata standing to her immediate left. Grinning, she spoke with that familiar confidence. "Now is this so bad?" she asked rhetorically. Part of it was just common courtesy, and genuine grawd that the Hyuga had indulged her. But another part was the hope that she'd be able to use this reprieve of Naruto's presence to endear the Hyuga toward her. God knows she wouldn't be able to do it with his presence looming over both of them. This Hyuga was in charge of security, and lack of security due to gaining trust meant an easier escape. Hinata was her ticket out of here, because even if she was able to somehow find an escape out of this place, the opportunity would be gone by the time she was done with Hinata, if she would even be done at all. She had fought the Hyuga once already at Sakai, and she had proven her mettle very well in that city. Hinata turned her pale eyes onto Temari's silver-hued ones. "Try anything." She let the threat hang. "Of course, since I'm just armed to the teeth right now." The blonde drawled, rolling her eyes with sarcasm dripping from her words. She eyed the hallway, finding one of the many open sections which led out to the gardens. She made her way closer to that area, finally seating herself on the threshold between the hallway and the soft, moist grass of the garden itself. She looked to Hinata, before gesturing with her hand for the Hyuga to join her. After a brief moment's hesitation, Hinata obliged. Perhaps due to the fact that despite her composure she too was definitively bored. She just knew how to hide it better. After all, when one has to deal with the stuffed shirts that were the Hyuga, even the liberated branch members, one learned how to hide many things, the least of which was boredom. Temari waited for Hinata to sit before she turned her eyes heavenward, glancing to the bright orb that hung in the sky. "You ever stare at the moon, Hyuga?" Hinata stared at the Suna ninja with apathy as her response. Temari continued, uncaring and undeterred to her companion's silence. "I do. I guess I picked it up from Gaara, he always liked the moon. This moon over Konoha is nice, but it's too small, the one in Suna is much bigger. Probably due to the lack of trees, some kind of visual illusion or some such nonsense. The moon is the same no matter where you go. What are you trying to get at?" Hinata said slowly, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. Temari shrugged. "Nothing, just passing the time." There was an awkward pause in the conversation, one which would have been uncomfortable if either of the participants truly cared what one thought of the other. The silence was once again broken by Temari. "So you got any embarrassing stories to tell?" The blonde questioned as she fell back, lying on the cold wooden floors of the open hallway. Hinata again stared at her, raising an eyebrow in question. "Excuse me, embarrassing stories?" Temari repeated. "You know of your friends and colleagues. You know, like when one of them tripped and fell down a well or messed up in training and s themselves in the toe. You know, anything. Why on earth would you want to know that?" "Because I'm bored out of my mind and the monotony of my days is growing more and more tedious by the second. Give me something I can laugh at later." Temari nearly groaned. What was so bad about a few stories? It wasn't as if she was asking for profiling on their skill levels and ranks. Hinata's eyebrow notched itself just a bit higher. Opening her mouth to speak, she see herself off as she caught the sound of a blade sailing through the air, the low pitch nearly unrecognizable if one wasn't trained to pick it up. She quickly assessed the trajectory of the projectile, determining it was aimed to see the artery along her left hip. Because she was sitting down, that meant the individual was most likely at an angle behind her and slightly to the left. Rolling to the side, she positioned herself to throw at any area in that general vicinity before activating her Byakugan. She quickly found her attacker and threw her own kunai, striking the man in the sea before he fell to the floor. Temari for her part had seen the attack as well, and if she hadn't, the knife itself into the wooden floorboards would have been enough to alert her. Her first instinct was to attack Hinata, believing this to be some kind of rescue. But then she hesitated, remembering that Naruto had accused Kumo of trying to kill her and Kankuro during Konoha's invasion of it. She had to be sure, Hinata could be her salvation or her warden, and she needed to know what role she would be playing. Getting to her feet, it did not take long for one of her opponents to answer her question. She turned at the sound of footsteps, silent as they were, finding the source to be a ninja, clad in black skin-tight clothing and a mask. Wrapped to the back of his right hand were 3 sharp claws, designed to block and break swords. In his other hand was a short sword of his own. In a belt around his waist she could see some of his own equipment pouches. These held, more likely than not, his kunai. kunai she could use. The blackened shadows of the Anbu dropped down around them and hastily bowed to the lone figure in red. Lord. The head captain with a falcon mask spoke. Naruto nodded, and the voice that greeted Temari's ears was the same one she had known at Sakai. The tone she knew belonged to the one who had gained the name, the Devil King. Collect the bee, run tests, interrogate the prisoners and discover how they compromised Wolf Squad. If they're not the commander soon will be. Spread word to the other squads, escort Miss Sabaku to her quarters, 24-hour guard watch. Yes sir. The Anbu chorused, with most vanishing in clouds of smoke along with the bee. 4 remained, walking up to Temari and helping the Suna Kanoiki get to her feet, hissing at the pain in her injured shoulder. Naruto turned at the sound, finally noticing her injury. Take her to the infirmary, treat the injury. The Anbu nodded, flanking the girl. Temari looked to the cage of Konoha, her eyes blank as he stared back at her. I suppose you were telling the truth after all. Naruto said nothing before the Anbu began escorting her. He turned his eyes onto Hinata. Disheveled as she was able to keep her regal countenance in front of him, breathing somewhat heavily as the adrenaline dried down. You have done well. The blonde began with a nod. Hinata returned the nod with one of her own accompanied by a sigh of relief. Thank you. Naruto again nodded. I want you. He paused, shifting from foot to foot for a moment, catching Hinata's attention as well as her worry. I want. He began to repeat, but before he could complete the sentence to Hinata's utter shock, the towering man collapsed, on his knees, before slowly falling forward. Wah! The Hyuga let out with a startled gasp as she reflexively caught him. N.A. Naruto? She questioned before she registered the feel of bee in her hand. Looking down to her red-stained hand, it confirmed her suspicion of the substance. Moving his cloak from her way, she caught sight of a kunai in his side. What? She began before looking up to him. You never would have gotten hit by this. What's going on? When did it happen? Then a thought occurred to her. The trip to the mountain pass took 2.5 days. Meaning it was a 5-day round trip. Naruto had only been gone for 6 days, maybe 7 given how late it was. When? Naruto, when did you leave the northern defense outpost? The blonde seemed to regain his strength, as well as his bearings as he slowly stood, once again towering over the Hyuga clan head. 36 hours ago. 36. She echoed with no small amount of incredulousness in her voice. Did you even sleep? She could not imagine, even Naruto being able to cross those endless valleys and confusing forests in just a day and a half while getting standard 8 hours, or even the shinobi's recommended 4 hours while on missions. Even he couldn't be that fast. No. The cage said, reaching for the side of the hallway to steady himself. I knew that he would either try to launch an attack on the village while I was gone, or attempt to our bargaining chip. If there would have been an attack, you would have been no good to us, and in the condition you are now, even you wouldn't have lasted very long in a battle. Naruto's eyes glowed red from beneath his hood. You forget that this chakra would be more than enough of a deterrent for any attackers. They would have retreated. We cannot afford to lose troops and resources now with an attack on our capital city. As it stands, it will be difficult to win an all-out war with Suna and Kumo with the economic and military infrastructure of our villages intact. Temari must be protected at all costs to bring a swift conclusion to this war. We are not invincible, and neither do we have endless troops, supplies and money to fund this war for the next decade. Hinata shook her head. You're insane. You're going to get yourself killed if you keep this up. Go and get some rest. I will reassign new guards and keep control of the situation until you're ready physically to take over again. Naruto shook his head. No, I can deal with this. Keep your guard over Temari. I will rest later. Hinata's eyes narrowed. She hesitated in her next action but eventually went through with it. No, you just collapsed on me. You'll rest now. I'll handle the situation and assign new guards to replace Wolf and bolster the patrols. Naruto turned his eyes to face the lavender pools that stared deeply into his own. Never before had she questioned his orders, even those that put her at great risk. Strange that she would argue against these when they presented very little risk to her and more to him. He had left the mountain pass 36 hours ago, but he had been up for another 16, that was 52 hours without sleep, and even though the mind would begin to shut down at 72 hours, and could live for a total of 264 before it was finally forced to shut down, permanently even for him, 56 hours of no sleep, in the middle of which had been a battle with his foolish sibling and endless trekking through forest, it was pushing it. Still he felt he should tie up the few loose ends left due to this attack and his abrupt departure from the mountain pass before he headed off to actually get some sleep. But here she was arguing against him. He looked down the hall. Rest sounded very tempting at this point. He turned his eyes back onto her. He supposed that if he would entrust anyone's competence other than Jiraiya, it may as well be her. She had proven it on countless occasions. He took a deep breath. Send a message to the northern border guard, tell Kurenai to remain there, and for Kimimaro to return to the northern attack force. Inform Shino of Kurenai's reassignment. Hinata nodded impatiently, almost fussing over the man. Yes, I will. Now go, sleep. I'll handle things. Naruto eyed her. Such an odd reaction his lack of sleep brought out of her. He shrugged it off and made his way towards his room. Hinata watched him leave, shaking her head in disbelief at his actions. But still, after a moment she smiled. This little moment of vulnerability for him was rare. To rare, it was somewhat refreshing to see that even he was human on occasion. With another shake of her head, the Hyuga matriarch made her way down the hall, ready to do whatever the hell she was supposed to do. But she knew of one person who did, ashamed she'd have to wake the individual up at this ungodly hour. Turning on her radio she spoke. Get Suzume to the office right now. And double all shifts around the house. Wouldn't want for this one moment of vulnerability to be his last. A lone figure sat at the base of a tree, her pale blonde hair trailing slightly in the breeze. The dry arid wind doing more harm than good as she squinted to keep the dirt out of her eyes. She had donned clothing, damaged and stained heavily with B. She had stolen it off a body of a ninja she had dragged away from the edge of the battlefield she had last been a part of. The battle she had seen her brother in. A battle where something had been revealed to her, where a veil had been uncovered from her eyes, where something had changed. Some promises, dear sister, must be kept, at all costs. Those were his words, his exact words to her. It was a promise that bound him. A promise that drove him. A promise that him continued to him. She wasn't sure where the thought came from. What made her believe this, but something did. Something told her that despite all outward appearances, despite everything pointing to the contrary, despite all the power present at his very fingertips, Uzumaki Naruto, the demon of Konoha, the Devil King, the man who cannot be was to this mysterious promise he'd given, to the will of another. She slowly stood, gathering whatever weapons she'd managed to take from the corpses she did, finishing the bandage she had been wrapping along her arm, and stared out to the arid desert that lay before her. Why now? Why was she having so much confusion over this man now? He had proven just yesterday that he was more than willing to her, if it hadn't been because the battle may have turned, she very well may have in that valley. So why was she so curious, so concerned? Staring into the sky she sighed. Akina trudged her way through the desert sands, the burning heat deterred little by the thick material of her boots. The heavy clothes made up for this, however, doing a good job of holding off the high-raised Suna sun, which was every bit as cruel and hot as the rumors set it out to be. Her 2 water canteens were still almost full though. She knew she needed to ration the water as much as humanly possible in case she got lost or sidetracked. Looking around, she determined it wouldn't be very hard to lose one's trajectory here. Nothing but sand dunes and sandstones, with a dry plant or two to break up the scenery every now and then. Why couldn't the sand village be in a beach? Beaches had sand, plenty of sand. They could have made it there and still kept the name village hidden in sand. The shoreside view would be a bonus too. So why did they forego a nice tropical beach, with coconuts, palm trees and shade? And instead chose to build in this, dry, hot, sandy desert? She sighed. Oh well, some things she couldn't change. And the location of the one place she could hopefully gain at least temporary asylum from both Naruto and Zhuge Liang certainly was on that list. As she continued to make her way through the desert, however, something was becoming more and more apparent up ahead of her. A dust cloud of sorts. Her first instinct was to immediately begin preparing herself for a possible sandstorm, having learned several methods to weather these storms, such as meditative breathing techniques and chakra control exercises that allowed one to hold their breath for a very long time in case one was buried beneath the waves of sand these storms often brought with them. But as she got closer and closer, she could tell that the dust cloud wasn't nearly big enough to be a sandstorm, and that it was moving further away from her. So, picking up her pace slightly, she decided to investigate. Approaching, she could make out a lot of commotion. It sounded like people. Many people. Her first thought was that it was an invasion force. But she quickly caught herself. Naruto had been all the way north just a few days ago. His army was hard-pressed enough, keeping a tight defense in their conquered territories. He wouldn't be able to launch an invasion force of this apparent size, or at least, she hoped not. As she slowly made her way up the last dune that shielded her view from whatever was causing this dust cloud, she could not help but openly gape at the sight. It was people, hundreds of people. It may even be hitting the thousands. All marching in a column line, making their way southeast. These are refugees, she realized as she allowed her eyes to travel over the hundreds of bee that trudged through the sand. She had seen a large refugee camp headed to Kumo, but nothing like this. This was different. It may be nearly twice the size of its Kumo counterpart. Or at least it seemed that way given its length. Before she could contemplate this sight further, however, she sensed someone directly behind her. She didn't even have the chance to turn as an arm wrapped around her T and the point of a kunai pressed against her spine, the arm holding her in place. "Don't move," came the voice of her captor. Akina glanced around slowly, trying to look over her shoulder to her attacker, but catching faint shimmers along the corners of her eyes. She looked around, and soon the shimmers became more pronounced, before melting away entirely, revealing half a dozen or so Tsunachunin with 2 Junin surrounding her. There was only one who was not a Chunin or Junin, but an Anbu. He, however, did not wear the standard armor, cloak and mask. Instead, his armor was black, lined with gold. The Anbu helmet, which normally was used to help hold up the animal mask, had been customized for him. Framing his tanned face, instead of the simple metal bands, there were golden dragons, their open mouths and fangs framing the sides of his chin, the dragon's horns, curved back so the points would be near the back of his head, accentuating his pale blonde, almost silver, spiky hair. His cuirass was an opaque gray, meant to absorb light rather than reflect it. The overlapping sections of armor that allowed him more freedom of movement were lined with gold, giving his armor something of a noble look. Or at least very expensive. His arms were covered only with the thin, skin-tight black cloth that most Anbu wore. His forearm and wrist guards were the same color as his cuirass, with seal designs etched in gold paint over them. Around his waist was a dark green sash, tied together with a dark blue belt. His pants were also gray, or perhaps a very dull brown. His boots were covered by the shin guards that shared the color of his armor. But the most eye-catching part of this entire ensemble was his weapon. A gold spear with a red shaft and black pommel counterweight at the end of it. The tip of the spear had an opening in the blade, the base of it curved back, forming 2 spikes that pointed outward on either side of the main blade and curved slightly so they were pointed towards the wielder. "Search her," barked the spear-wielding Anbu captain, and Akina soon felt the ninja holding the blade to her back pull away slightly, his hands moving to the pouches on her belt, finding whatever kunai and shuriken were held in their flimsy capacity. But then his hand started to trail lower, too low, and when it found a part of her anatomy that it most certainly wasn't supposed to find, the Kumo girl decided that this particular security detail was not one she was going to stomach. Spinning around, Akina quickly grabbed the offending hand before flipping the ninja over her shoulder. So surprised by this move was the offender that he didn't even have the opportunity to try and retaliate with his kunai before he was eating sand, his arm twisted behind his back with her standing over him. She saw the rest of the ninja step forward before a hand from the spear wielder stopped them. "Enough, she is no spy," he said before quickly looking down at his fallen squad mate. "And next time you do something like that while working under me, rookie, know that I'll break that arm myself." The ninja around her relaxed a bit, their weapons held pointed to the ground. She, reluctantly, released her prisoner, watching him scramble to his feet, rubbing his sore arm, glaring at her from behind the thin veil of the cloak that shielded him from the sun as he took his place beside his comrades. Akina glared back before turning her eyes to the commander with a skeptical eyebrow. "You got telepathy or something? You can immediately tell I'm not a spy." The tanned spear wielder shook his head. "No, but a spy wouldn't have brought unwanted attention or suspicion upon themselves by retaliating with physical violence to one of my men. Regardless, even if I still suspected you, we have neither the time or the resources to interrogate you fully. Our scouts have reported that a Konoha strike force led by the copy ninja is on the move to intercept us. Therefore we need to move fast, gather your weapons and join the caravan if you wish, or go your own way in hopes to avoid the attack. It makes no difference to me. As he finished speaking, both he and his men began to vanish, their be shimmering like distant mirages. Wait, she called to his quickly vanishing form. What's your name? Just before he completely vanished, he spoke. You may call me Daisuke. And the Jinchuriki was left staring at the empty space. Akina quickly turned her eyes to the caravan, the dust cloud of thousands of feet trudging through the desert rising high into the air. She grabbed some of her fallen kunai before making her way towards the people as they marched through the desert. Kakashi's heavily clothed form stood upon the dunes, using his single visible eye to survey the spectacle before him. A few paces behind the copy ninja were a dozen or so more ninja, most chunin, few junin, each cloaked under a genjutsu so that they could maintain their presence hidden, though it was doubtful they'd be seen this far off, seeing as how the sight of their target could barely be seen despite its size without the use of binoculars. Obiki, the second commander for this operation, walked up to his side, crossing his arms, his scarred visage looking even more merciless with the squint due to the harsh desert sun. Quite a sight, isn't it? Kakashi nodded. Quite a sight indeed. So that's what 1,000 refugees look like. Obiki nodded. Yay. Amazing how many people still hate Naruto enough to flee their homes with their entire families. Kakashi nodded. But what I don't understand is, why is Naruto just letting them go? He obviously knows about where they are if he sent us here to deal with them. Why didn't he intercept them earlier? 2 reasons. Obiki said, holding up 2 fingers. Simple reasons, but reasons nonetheless. The first is that he cannot afford voices of dissent in the villages when the next major battle occurs and he is forced to draw upon a great deal of his troop reserves and resources. And he will, you can believe that. And second, he wants to break the world's faith in Suna and Kumo. From rumors I've heard, Anko already hit a rather large encampment once they were in Kumo's jurisdiction, the ninja, but sparing the civilians. Because Kumo failed to protect them. The people will lose hope that they can escape to other villages safely. Kakashi finished. Brilliant, brutally cold, but efficient as usual. With this display of mercy he can silence any that would call him a monster while also destroying belief in the other villages' capabilities as well as the village's morale. Kakashi said, turning his head to face the interrogator. Perhaps. Obiki admitted. But all strategies carry their own risk, and this one is no different. Those who hate him may remain hating him despite this mercy, and with this strategy of most of the high skill set ninja that are with the refugees, it may only fan an already dangerous fire. Yes, but those ninja need to be They know too many of our secrets to simply be captured. The risk that they will leak sensitive information back to Suna or Kumo is too high to not them. Kakashi argued. Obiki shrugged. Regardless, we have our orders. Throwing a scarf over his shoulders to shield his face from the growing winds. Let's not mess them up, he said before making a quick gesture with his hand, and the dozens of ninja around the 2 junins vanished with him. Kakashi sighed. Yeah, after all, we will be attacking a civilian target. He spoke, almost to himself as he pulled his forehead protector up, revealing the 3 tomo of his Sharingan. With this gesture seemingly dozens of other ninja emerged from beneath the sands around him, like daisies, the golden grains falling off the clothing, like they fall off a scarab's scales, revealing the cloaks and masks to the world as they assembled on either side of the copy ninja. We can't afford to mess up. Akina maneuvered her way between the massive crowd of people, avoiding horses, oxen pulling carts and just regular passerby all the same, her worn down and ragged clothing allowing her to easily blend into the crowd, appearing as unimportant as possible. The last thing she wanted was for any word to return to Kumo. Since Suna was in an alliance with Kumo, they would practically be obligated to report that she was there if they found out who she was. Hell, they may even be obligated to just outright hand her over to Kumo, and that she certainly did not want. She estimated that she was somewhere near the middle of the caravan at this point before a voice made itself known from beyond the background noise. Grandma, I'm tired. I don't want to walk anymore. Akina raised her eyes up to the path ahead of her, finding a young girl, probably no older than 7 or 8, tugging on the sleeve of an old woman while she was tugging a horse by the reins. The animal was pulling a cart, no doubt loaded with this family's material goods. The old woman stopped, pulling the horse to a stop as well. Okay dear, come, you can ride in the cart for a while more. You'll have to get off soon though, Cloud still needs to pull this cart for a lot longer and we cannot afford him tiring out before we reach sooner, okay? The little girl nodded, but Akina could see her eyes filled with confusion and sadness. But why are we coming out here anyway, Grandma? Why did we have to leave home? You'll understand when you're older, dear. The old woman explained as best she could, not having the patience to explain to a 7-year-old how her parents had been killed for merely speaking out against the regime. She had warned her daughter and son-in-law, many times, the dangers of saying such things. But being from Kusa, the nation that had lost the most when Konoha had taken the central marshlands, they both felt that there had still been time, that the will to fight Konoha again had not been fully extinguished yet. When the fact of the matter was, that the will of Kusa and all other nations to fight openly had been broken the moment the Leaf Village's banner waved over the city gates instead of their own. But I wanna understand now. The child whined, holding up her hands as the older woman leaned down to pick her up. I know dear, I know, she said, but before she could grab the child another set of arms lifted the girl. For a brief moment the older woman and child felt panic, but it quickly vanished as they both saw that she was being lowered into the cart. Ah, thank you young one, the older woman said, rising to her full height as the stranger turned to face her. Akina smiled as she turned, finally getting a good look at the older woman. She seemed to be in her late 60s, probably early 70s. Her back was beginning to hunch a bit, but her legs still held strength as she walked, not needing the support of a cane or anything else yet. It was nothing, she said before resuming her pace and walking ahead of the woman and child. The older woman smiled in broad, but soon her eyes caught sight of the bee in the back of Akina's clothing. Oh my, what is that? She called, making Akina pause in her tracks, looking over her shoulder. What's what? The Jinchuriki asked, watching as the older woman approached with her cart in tow. She quickly gripped Akina's shirt with her index and middle finger, stretching it out to examine the bee and hole more carefully. Oh, that, Akina said somewhat sheepishly, embarrassed that she may have to explain how she had pilfered this clothing off a man. Well, the old woman seemed to smile, a strange benign smile that made Akina believe as if she already knew what had happened. Accepting her excuse without even needing to hear it, goodness dear, this is unacceptable, we can't have a nice girl like you wandering around in these. I think I may just have something that's just your size, she said as she went back to her cart. Akina's eyes widened at the action. Quickly she held up her hands, following the older woman. Oh no, wait, that's really nice of you, but I'm fine really. Nonsense, child, the woman said as she rummaged through a sand-covered sea. A kind action always deserves another. Remember that, Maya. Yes, Grandma, the child answered back. Akina tried to protest, but her voice fell on deaf ears as the old woman continued to rummage through her pack. Ah, here we are, she stated, pulling out some white clothing. She turned with a smile to face the younger woman. Here you are, come now, she said, grabbing a large brown quilt of some sort before handing one edge to the small girl and circling Akina so that she was trapped between the quilt and the cart, shielding her from the eyes of the passerbys. Akina blinked in confusion, wondering just how she's gotten into this situation. Peering through the side of the drape that shielded her, she nervously smiled at the older woman. Miss, I really appreciate the offer, but I'm fine really. Please, child, don't make me insist, the woman said with her own small smile. Come now and hurry. The caravan is still moving. Akina sighed with a small shake of her head. She really didn't want to impose on these people. She could get by with what she had now, and they would probably need these clothes more than she would. Speaking of which, just how the hell did they have her size? She shook her head. She may as well get it over with, since she really didn't want to insult the older woman by denying her offer. So, with eyes snapping in every direction to make sure there weren't any peeping toms in this caravan, she quickly began to change. A few moments later she peeked her head off the side of the drape, tapping the older woman on the shoulder. I'm done, she called, making the old woman walk towards her granddaughter, shedding away the barrier that shielded the blonde from the eyes of the others around her. Now that's nice, the older woman commented appraisingly as she observed the young woman with a critical eye. She now wore a white, no-sleeve silk shirt, over a light blue form-fitting long-sleeved one. Both shirts were tucked into a pair of white shinobi functional pants that had small S along the sides which allowed her thighs to remain slightly visible. Her pants were tucked securely into white shinobi sandals and several weapon pouches hung from her belt. A light blue scarf out of musk, made of a thin silk was wrapped around her end, trailing down to the small of her back from her left shoulder. Akina smiled as she looked to the old woman and young girl. Thank you, but, really you shouldn't have. I'm a seamstress, dear, I have plenty to sell once we reach sooner. Besides, you look like you needed it more than us. You look nice, lady, came the voice of the little girl, complimenting her as her legs dangled off the side of the cart. Akina smiled. Thank you. I'm sorry. Here I am taking your gift when I haven't even introduced myself. My name is Akina. Nice to meet you, dear. I'm afraid you are not the only one whom has forgotten introductions. The old woman said as she kept smiling. My name is Kiko and this little angel here is my granddaughter Maya. The little girl waved timidly. Akina smiled in return as she gave another small wave of her own. Kiko then moved to the side, grabbing the horse's reins. She turned to look over her shoulder at the younger woman. Would you like to join us then? It's a long road to Suna and we both seem like we could use the company at the moment. Akina smiled somewhat sadly before she nodded. Sure, she said before walking forward and grabbing the reins of the horse. I'll take him for now, you seem tired. Thank you, dear. Staring down at the sight of the refugees, 3 Suna Anbu commanders stood on one of the taller of the dunes. Their heavy cloaks draped over their shoulders, the golden brown color blending in with the surrounding sands. One was the unmasked, code-named Daisuke, the other 2 did have their masks, one a tiger, the other a cobra. We cannot continue like this. The tiger-masked Anbu spoke. All these civilians are slowing us down. Konoha will catch up to us soon at this pace. We've already lost contact with the rear guard. What would you suggest then? Daisuke began with a sideways glance. That we simply abandon them to AM. I won't do that. These people came to us for help and they are a burden we can't afford right now. The tiger-masked Anbu interrupted. All these people will just be like parasites, that will just suck the L out of Suna's coffers. The only ones of importance are the nobles. They're the ones who will contribute to fund the war effort. Not the peasants who could barely even bring the clothes on their backs. He does have a point, Commander. We can only come out on the losing end by defending peasants our government will have to support and feed in the end should they make it to our village. We should take the nobles and go. Cobra said, turning his head to face Daisuke. So what are you saying? Daisuke questioned, his voice heated as he rounded on the 2. Just because they cannot grant more money into our banks that their lives are less important than the ones who can. You 2 would abandon nearly 1,000 people to save just a few dozen because it's convenient. What will that do to the men's morale, or Suna's image to the world? The tiger and cobra masked Anbu turned to one another before facing Daisuke again. This is not up for discussion. This mission was given an odd number of commanders in order to not allow split decisions. The 2 of us say that we will gather the nobles and slip away from the caravan as soon as possible. If you choose to defy us, we'll have you signed up on a court-martial once we return to the village. Daisuke's eyes narrowed with something akin to disgust as he shook his head. The 3 then turned their heads to the sound of one of the refugees. Konoha. Konoha is here. The 3 Anbu commanders turned their eyes to the horizon, finding there to be several small silhouettes making their way across the desert several hundred yards behind the refugees and quickly swallowing up the distance between the 2. Daisuke turned his eyes to the other 2 commanders. Well then, he said, a disgusted tone in his voice as he shoved past the 2. We had better move. Wouldn't want to catch ourselves actually doing fighting the war we're paid to fight. The organized march had quickly turned into chaos. Dozens of people, previously lethargic and slow in their pace, now running in a frenzy, snapping the reins of their horses and yanking on the yokes of oxen as they began running. Only the massive size of the refugee column and knowledge of the general direction they needed to go in was keeping them from just running off in random directions like lunatics. It was a frenzy, every man for himself mentality had fully taken over. Akina pulled the reins of the horse down as the massive animal stood on its hind legs, startled by someone that had crossed its path too quickly. Kiko held Maya in her arms, hugging the small child close to her, uncaring to the fate of her cart. Akina had to admit, compared to some of the other people around here, she had her priorities straight. Walking back to her, she took the small girl from her arms. "Give her to me," she nearly yelled, taking the child from the older woman's eyes, ignoring the little girl's increasing cries of fear and confusion. "Grandma!" Akina felt the shrill cry right over her ear, making her wince a little. But she ignored the scream, placing the girl on top of the carriage. Turning to Kiko, she quickly helped the older woman onto the carriage herself. Scrambling to the back of the cart after she'd handed Kiko the reins to the horse, she quickly began dumping trunks of clothing and other supplies that did not include camping equipment or rations. "Go! Keep moving and don't stop, no matter what," she yelled as she jumped off the cart. "What? But what about you?" Kiko questioned, looking over her shoulder at the blonde. "Don't worry about me, just go," Akina yelled, throwing a kunai so the blunt end would strike the horse's backside. Startled, the animal whined and rushed forward, kicking up sand as it dragged the startled females further away from the attack and toward the destination before any more words could be said. Akina shielded her eyes from the grains of sand, stopping them from entering her eyes as she squinted. Watching as the carriage vanished amongst the rampaging sea of panic before her, Akina turned to face the approaching black dots. She glanced around, realizing rather quickly that Suna Ninja were nowhere in sight. Either they were waiting in ambush, or they weren't coming. Akina paused. Time seemed to slow to a crawl around her, as if the fates were granting her this reprieve in order for her to gather her thoughts. She didn't want to join herself in this fight. She wasn't sure anymore if in the end she would even want to join any fight. Perhaps the best thing for her to do would be to disappear. Leave this world to Naruto and Liang, let them tear each other apart for it if they really wanted it. Some promises, dear sister, must be kept, at all costs. Naruto's words echoed in her mind, bouncing off the walls of her skull. No. She couldn't leave because the sorrow would never end. It would never stop. He would never stop. He won't stop, not until he fulfilled whatever promise it was that he made, to whoever he made it to. She looked down to her feet, finding a kunai, discarded, half buried in the sand, and something seemed to come to her then. Slowly, ever so slowly, she knelt down, grasping the weapon in her hand, ignoring the sand that seeped between her fingers and under her fingernails as she did. "I may not know what promise drives you, brother. I may not even know if you were being truthful to me really, but today, I'm going to make a promise to you. I may not know how I'm going to keep it, or even if I'm right in doing so, but..." She paused, standing up to her full height, her hair whipping in a sudden gust of wind along with the silk scarf around her neck. She pulled the hair away from her eyes, settling it behind her ear as she watched the Konoha ninja grow closer and closer. Glancing down at the kunai in her hand, she gripped it tightly, her eyes closing for a brief moment before opening with a strange resolution settled within the sea blue orbs. "I swear," she began, "that I will free you from your own promise. Whatever it may be." She marched closer. Kakashi slowly made his way down the side of a dune, sand falling off the angled hill in droves, almost like actual water as the grains gave way beneath his weight, the heavy brown cloak draped over his shoulders doing little to hide the kunai in his right hand, his left free in order to help maintain his balance. As he reached the foot of the dune, watching as the ninja squads under his and Abiki's command rushed past him to press the pursuit, his Sharingan scanned the landscape for any genjutsu that may be concealing enemy ninja, but he found none. Strange, so far there was no resistance as they approached. She'd heard the refugee ninja and Kumo's own had fought practically tooth and nail to try and fight off Anko's assault. They didn't succeed. After all, it was Anko. Crazy Bee probably scared off half the opposing force by just doing that thing she does with a shuriken. Yes, moving on. Still, it was odd that not one scrap of resistance was pulling itself together to face them. They knew that Suna Ninja were in the caravan. They had already killed off a few scouts on the way down here. They may be hiding in the crowd, hoping to throw the Anbu off with the chaos of civilian targets around. All teams. The copy ninja spoke into the comms. Enemy units may be hiding within the refugee column. I repeat, enemy units may be hiding in the refugee column, dressed as civilians. Herd the refugees into Abiki's squadron ahead of us before you move in to subdue the civilian populace. First squad copies. Second squad, roger that, Wolf. Third squad, that's a go. This is 4th Squad here. Commander, you may want to turn that eye of yours this way. We appear to have some resistance headed right for us. Kakashi did so, turning his eye towards 4th Squad, who he had placed at the center of the formation since they were the most numerous, numbering roughly a dozen squad mates, whereas the others were of 6, 8 at the most. 4th Squad also had the highest rookie count. These kids needed to learn quick if they were gonna survive what was to come. Attacking a relatively mid to low danger refugee column headfirst seemed like the best bet to get them some easy experience. His Sharingan immediately caught sight of what 4th Squad was up against. A single, young girl. Dressed in white. She was charging headlong into them. Kakashi's Sharingan spun slowly, again checking for any genjutsu. As he did that, the commander of the 4th Squad, who had slowed his pace, called back to Kakashi. Commander, please confirm if we should engage. Kakashi scanned the girl and the area around her for a moment. Even at a distance the Sharingan couldn't be fooled. 4th Squad, you may engage target if proven hostile. I detect no genjutsu on her or the area around her. I say again, you have the green light to engage if the target proves hostile. Acknowledged. Kakashi watched as 4th Squad regained momentum, matching their former pace as they placed themselves into an attack formation to deal with singular targets. There were only, at most, maybe half a dozen yards away from one another before there was a bright, white flash. Kakashi squinted for the split second it occurred before he saw one of the Chunin of Squad 4 blasted into the dunes by a lightning attack from the girl's fingertips. Again, another flash. This time he saw her using a lightning-laced kunai to hold off his men. She was fast, very fast. Kakashi watched as she quickly disabled 2 more of the rookies. Squads 2 and 3 proceed with the attack. Squad 1 double back and compensate for Squad 4's delay. This girl may prove more trouble than she's worth. Squad 4, hold tight, I'm on my way. The copy ninja said before he began making his way across the dunes. Would ya look at that? The tone of disbelief and slight awe in his subordinate's tone made Daisuke look over his shoulder at the younger man. Stop stalling. We need to hurry, he said, loathing the twisting, disgusting feeling in his gut with every step that led him to further abandon the helpless civilians. Slightly ahead of his unit, which acted as the rear guard, were Tiger and Cobra, escorting the nobles and their families, quickly forming distance between themselves and their Konoha attackers. But Commander, look. Daisuke sighed, rolling his eyes. This was why he hated rookies on his squad. No discipline, no self-control, no restraint. What is it? He snapped, rounding to face the back of the, possibly, teenager's head. Look. The rookie pointed towards the approaching Konoha ninja. It's that girl, remember, the one we stopped earlier. She's wearing different clothes, but it's definitely her. At that statement, several more of Daisuke's squad mates rallied around the instigator of this debacle, curious to see the girl that had so easily subdued one of their own only hours earlier. Daisuke couldn't stop from rolling his eyes as the chatter began. Look at her. She's nuts, charging the enemy alone like that. She's outnumbered 50 to 1. She's only fighting 1 or 2 of the squads, don't exaggerate. Daisuke rolled his eyes before walking forward to get a glimpse of this spectacle. When he first saw her, making her way across the sands towards the enemies that approached her, Daisuke's first thought was that she had been a spy or scout that was now retreating back behind her allies to fight another day. But when he saw the flash of light, and the lightning that struck one of the Konoha ninja, he knew he had been mistaken. Daisuke wasn't sure what it was about the sight of her charging the Konoha ninja, all by herself. But, for some odd reason, it struck a chord in him. He didn't know why. He had seen similar sights in his nearly 15-year career as a Suna ninja. But, there was just something strange, something odd about her. The way she moved, her very gait, her walk was heavy. Burdened. Even from this distance she seemed, strangely sad. But he could also see something else. Determination. As already stated, it was an odd sight. But a strangely, inspiring one. And he suddenly realized why it was that he felt this. It was almost like an epiphany that came to him as he gazed toward the refugee column. She did not flee. It was such a simple concept it was almost humorous. She simply did not flee. The names Konoha and the Devil King had been spoken in hushed whispers, shied away from so many times, that they had become almost synonymous with fear in Suna. Something that could be seen even with so-called elites like Cobra and Tiger. They feared Konoha, they fled from Konoha. But she was different. She actually rushed toward them, challenged them, and she did so alone, not with an army at her back. When she finally delivered her first attack, striking down one of the Konoha ninja in a bright flash of white light, the Suna commander couldn't help the emotion of slight wonder that danced across his eyes. For this brief moment in time she was amazing. Crazy fool's gonna get herself K. There's no way she can win. Daisuke nodded to himself as he looked to his spear. Perhaps, but she won't BS alone. Before any of his squad could fully grasp the meaning of what he just said, the unmasked commander was already closing the distance between himself and the girl. Commander. The startled shouts that reached Daisuke's ears he ignored, knowing that his men would follow and proving himself right a moment later as the squad took their positions behind him. A smirk played across his features. It was time to stop running from Konoha. The blast was deafening to her ears, making them ring like high-pitched whistles. The shockwave knocked her onto her back, sand slipping into the back of her shirt and getting in her hair, but she paid it no never mind as she rolled, getting back to her feet and using chakra to stay there as the sands continued to shift beneath her. Two Chunin rushed to her flanks, attempting to hit her from both sides simultaneously. Normally she would have jumped, but the weak sand beneath her feet didn't allow enough stability to get very high. She ducked as the one to her right swung, before quickly catching the wrist of the second to her left as his blade descended. She twisted, putting the weapon in a position so the blade was upwards and the blunt side was towards her, using it to block the follow-up swing of the attacker to her right. She spun on her heel, sand kicked up into the air with her movement as she swiped her lightning-edged kunai across the man's stomach, it wide open, staining the sands red before she got to her feet, using the same kunai to see off the arm of the ninja she'd been holding. The man screamed in pain, gripping the injured limb with a vice-like grip for only a split second before she kicked him away. She spun around, blade at the ready, her eyes darting back and forth to the 8 men left in the squad, trying to determine which one would attack next, as they circled her, their speed dizzying in its intensity as she tried to keep up. But she had to keep up. She not only had the disadvantage of numbers, but also the lack of an arsenal. Other than her main weapon, the 3-pieced staff, and jutsus that could be used in conjunction with it, the vast majority of her arsenal consisted of mid to long-range lightning techniques. Thus, without that weapon she was severely limited in both offensive and defensive techniques. She heard the crunching of sand beneath a boot, slightly behind her and to her right. She spun around, leaning back to avoid a kunai swipe to the shoulder. She was about to retaliate when, to her left, one of the ninja emerged from the sand dunes, 2 kunai at the ready. Akina turned, but she knew she wouldn't be able to put up a proper defense in time. This theory was proven right as both kunai were soon plunged, hilt deep right into her shoulders. A scream was from her T as blinding pain tore through her arms and C. Falling onto her back, she still had enough sense left to get her attacker off her. So planting her feet on the Konoha ninja's stomach, she pushed him off. Vaguely noticing his rank to be that of a Junin. She grit her teeth, jumping to her feet as she realized she had little time to waste, the bee now staining the white and light blue clothing before she yanked out the weapons from her tearing it all the more in her haste before the wounds quickly resealed themselves. Before she could even recover from the rapidly dissipating pain, 2 more Chunin were on the attack. One coming with an overhead swing with a sword, the other with a swing that would open her waist. She threw her lightning-charged kunai, the weapon easily shattering the Chunin's sword before he got to her. Then she did a cartwheel, avoiding the second blade as it passed under her. She threw a kunai mid-jump, catching the second Chunin in the calf, making him stagger as he fell to one knee. Landing on her feet, she saw the Chunin whose sword she had broken leap into the air, throwing a shuriken before he began his hand seals. In an instant, one projectile turned into 100. Chakra converged in the girl's palms, small jolts of electricity leaping for a brief moment from her fingertips before she clapped her hands together. The sparks grew in intensity for a moment before she thrust her hands to either side of her, a transparent field of lightning spreading out in front of her, with only small jolts of lightning snaking their way over the thin shell of it to make out its surface. At once, the kunais were blown back, the polarity of the static electricity working like the other end of the magnet, repelling the electrified kunai before they could strike her, with most vanishing in a cloud of smoke a split second later except for the original kunai. Her head snapped to the side, where another of the ninja had just launched a fire jutsu at her. Again, more lightning emerged from her fingertips, hitting the fireball on. But it did not stop the attack, the sparks and flames mixed and clashed. The flames did not stop, changing color from orange to blue as the electricity continued to pour into it. The former Kumo Kanoiki sidestepped to avoid the now blue fire before she brought her attention back to the man that had thrown the shuriken as he lunged at her. She caught his wrist, ducking slightly so he would pass over her shoulders. As he did, she yanked on his wrist, his forward momentum and her slightly chakra-enhanced strength snapping his upper arm with a violent twist. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he finally spotted the Suna reinforcements approaching where the girl was fighting. They would arrive barely a few seconds after he did if they kept up the pace and he increased his. But still, this was too much of a coincidence. Suna arrived just as they'd broken formation, heading for Squad 4, going around the other squads in order to get to the girl. If his suspicions were true and there were enemies hiding in the refugee column, then with this squad flanking them they would easily be able to catch the other 3 squads with an attack from the front and the rear. He couldn't allow that. Squads, break off the attack on the refugee columns. I repeat, break off the attack on the refugees. Suna's escort force has been spotted converging around 4th squad's position, estimated numbers to be. He paused, quickly counting the Suna squads rushing into the fight. 24 at least, more are coming over the hill as we speak. Initial hostile estimated to be a higher class Jun and possibly an Anbu commander. Double back to Squad 4's position immediately. Switching frequencies, the copy ninja spoke again. Abiki. A moment of static. Yay. Regroup at our position. The enemy may have anticipated our attack. Do not engage the refugee column, the risk is too high for an ambush. Understood. Heading to rally point. Kakashi shut off the radio just as he rushed over the last dune, leaping into the air to swallow up the remaining distance. His hands quickly formed the hand seals for his signature technique as he saw the girl dispatch yet another of Squad 4. Reikiri. Akina heard the roar of 1,000 birds, the attack itself drowning out its name, as she turned, meeting the fierce gaze of a fixed, spinning Sharingan eye. Quickly she brought 2 kunai to her hands, pointing them at the incoming attack before 2 lightning blades extended from them, nearly 6 feet where they clashed with the Reikiri. Kakashi's technique was not, however, considered a higher class ninjutsu for nothing, nor had the rumor that he had used it to see a lightning bolt in half merely an over-exaggerated rumor. Something he proved beyond the shadow of a doubt in this field of battle as the Reikiri practically tore through the lightning blades like a bulldozer would go through a building. Kakashi saw her eyes widen, the movement slow and easily read by the crimson eye swirling like a vortex in its socket. But then he felt his own eyes go wide as he saw something else, something impossible. But he knew his eyes did not deceive him, they never did. The Sharingan was not fooled. And even if it was fooled, no one could imitate what he saw a split second before it actually happened. With the forward momentum he had already built up, he couldn't avoid the object of his shock before it struck. A red claw, emerging from the girl's arm, smacked the arm holding the Reikiri off its course, batting it to her side so he would pass her harmlessly. Kakashi's arm was buried shoulder deep into glass a moment later, the girl a bit to his left and slightly behind. He spun around, using his free hand as the axis. He tried to kick her in the face with both legs. But his heels only met her forearm as she blocked the attack. Getting to his feet, the copy ninja saw another of his ninja approaching her, 6 ready for the K when a gold and red spear pierced the man from the back, the point sticking out of his C as he stumbled. He collapsed, the spear pushing itself out as he fell onto the sand, the grains greedily drinking up the B. Kakashi's eyes snapped up to the Suna ninja as they swarmed over the area, striking down the majority of 4th squad before they could regroup. Kakashi's gaze turned to his left, where squads 1, 2 and 3 had just finished rising over the dune. A scant few seconds later the battle raged in earnest. His Sharingan then caught movement from the corner of his eye, a kunai slipping into his wrist which he used to quickly block a swing from his female opponent. His eyes narrowed, watching as the edges of the girl's eyes seemed to hold a faint hint of red before it be out into crystalline blue. Who are you? The copy ninja questioned as sparks of electricity began to rise from their weapons. If he was truly expecting an answer, he didn't get it, only a shove from the girl as she pushed him back. He didn't stumble, the kunai in his hands was thrown to the girl, distracting her as she was forced to dodge the metal projectile. Giving Kakashi the few moments he needed to complete his seals, the copy ninja wiped his C-thumb on a scroll before tossing it aside. Akina felt, more than heard the shifting of sand beneath her feet, her every instinct screaming jump. She did so, watching as 5 dogs exploded from the sand formerly beneath her feet, their jaws snapping as they clawed at air, trying to catch her. Akina grabbed 5 shuriken from her pouch, throwing the projectiles with accuracy as she hit the 5 summons, making them vanish in puffs of smoke. Kakashi did not have a natural wind affinity, but he was not known as the copycat ninja for nothing. Proven by the next jutsu pulled from his sleeve. Kei's no Kenkadu. The copy ninja yelled. With the heightened hearing, the low pitch of wind blades made themselves known to the blonde girl. But hearing something and dodging something, especially while in mid-air, were 2 completely different things. So it was no surprise when a split second later dozens of sea crisscrossed every inch of her skin. And then in next split second she vanished in a puff of smoke, a kunai taking her place. A kunai with a note tied to the hilt. Kakashi recognized the tag a moment too late as the tag soon exploded in a bright flash of blinding white light, stunning nearby Suna and Konoha Chunin alike. Kakashi nearly cried out as his Sharingan took nearly the full force of the blinding flash tag. The copy ninja shielded his eyes and face, his other senses taking over for his currently disabled sight, ears twitching as he tried to drown out the sounds of the battle around him. There, the copy ninja thought to himself, leaping away from where he suspected the next attack to be coming from. Those tags had a special effect. Most people who got hit panicked trying to blink the blindness away, when in reality with every additional exposure to light the blindness would only take longer to go away. However, if one waited patiently for 5 seconds with their eyes closed, the tag's effect would dissipate naturally. Most couldn't afford to wait half a second in the ninja world. But he was the copy nin, one didn't get to where he was without raising their survival timer a little bit. Opening his eyes before he even landed, the world again came back into focus, bleary at first but soon sharp and clear. Kakashi's eyes immediately fixed themselves on the girl, a moment before another lightning jutsu shot from her fingertips towards the copy ninja. Kakashi's Sharingan went to work, spinning rapidly. The copy ninja charged forward, dodging the lightning bolts as they came, his Sharingan giving him just enough foresight to do so relatively safely. When he had closed about half the distance between them, the copy ninja again formed the hand seals for his signature technique, the Reikiri, wreathing his hand with crackling power. His eyes narrowed, he needed to be sure what he saw was what he suspected. He sidestepped more of the lightning bolts, never really slowing down and keeping a path solely fixed on her. Akina grit her teeth. Techniques like this one and Naruto's Rasengan were driving her to the brink of insanity. They held so much raw power that she really had no real way of effectively countering them. She see off the flow of lightning to her hands, and Kakashi saw the simmer of red chakra dance across her palms. And when his gaze returned to meet hers, he knew for sure. Only one other person had that gaze. Still he paid it no mind, his mind focused on his task to defeat the girl. When he was finally close enough, he knew that she would try to deflect the attack again, and so when she did he was ready, leaping over the claw and continuing. Now his Reikiri aimed for her face, rather than her sea. But then her other hand came up, palm facing him, and he saw that he would again fail. Adjusting his flight, Kakashi stepped on the red chakra extension of her hand, using it to leap back seconds before a second one would have taken off his head. The copy ninja backflipped, landing lightly on his feet, his eyes never leaving the gaze of his opponent as that chakra fell away from her skin, vanishing back to the void where it came from. This was too risky. She was an unknown variable in strength, skill, ability and knowledge on how to control her beast. If what she had shown so far was any indicator, it was very well. Looking to the squads still fighting against the Suna ninja, he noticed that there was an Anbu captain in the Suna ninja ranks. Fighting this girl and someone of his skill set wouldn't end well, even if he did call a Biki to him. Fall back. The copy ninja yelled out his order, chakra making his voice carry itself over the chaos of the battlefield. The Konoha Chunin did so without question or pause, some vanishing in wisps of smoke, others into the shifting sands below. Across the battlefield there was a pause, an awkward silence that settled over the Suna ninja. It felt heavy with shock, disbelief and incredulity. But those emotions were soon discarded, replaced by the growing sense of elation that came over the Suna combatants, an elation that was vocalized as the relatively small squad of 30 or so ninja all let out a great cheer. Their voices filled with a strange relief that seemed to carry itself into the heavens. The sun over Suna, For this moment was no longer harsh and oppressive, but warm and relieving. The sun seemed to lose its glare, allowing whomever wished to stare at the clear blue sky freely and without a care. A few embraced one another, their hearts still racing from the battle, from the euphoria they were feeling now. They felt as though they could take on the Devil King himself and come out victorious for this brief moment. As Daisuke watched all of this, his eyes turned to the girl they owed it to. A smile spreading across his features as he walked up to her, noting her breathing heavy and the shell-shocked look still spread over her face. He stepped in front of her, bringing her attention to him. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he smirked down at her. You fought with skill. So did your opponent. I did not get a good look at him though. Do you know who he was? Still somewhat dazed by the abrupt ending of the battle, Akina responded without much thought, having recognized Kakashi from the bingo books. Sharingan no Kakashi. The copy ninja. The two heard one of the Chunin gasp. Indeed, Kakashi, despite the infamy and near pandemonium the name of his cage brought to the minds of those who it was spoken to, was infamous himself throughout the ninja nations and was still very well recognized for his skills and abilities, dwarfed as they were by men such as Naruto and Jiraiya. The Chunin quickly turned to his comrade. Did you hear that? She scared off the copy ninja. Unbelievable. Immediately murmurs broke throughout the Chunin assembled around her, few which Akina and Daisuke were able to make out clearly. Look, she doesn't even seem injured. To scare off Sharingan no Kakashi like that. Damn, she must be good. The way she just rushed right into that squad of Chunin, it was amazing. With this girl at our side, we can actually win. We may be able to beat the Devil King yet. Akina listened to the men talk with a growing sense of dread rising from the pit of her stomach. And from his place at her side, Daisuke felt that same feeling as well. Naruto sat at the desk in his home, marking his signature over various papers and trade forms. The reason he was in his home was simply because, after Hinata had told Suzume what had happened with his lack of sleep episode, Suzume, the next morning before he had even arrived at the office, had all his paperwork transferred here. He still couldn't understand why entirely. He was already fully rested, and a mile or so walk from his home to the tower wouldn't be a detriment to his health, or very exhausting. But regardless, it made little difference to him whether he went over the paperwork in his office or in his study. They still needed to be signed. He paused mid-brush stroke as he sensed a presence outside his door, the ice blue eyes looking to the sliding portal before he spoke. You may enter. The door slid open, revealing none other than Sabaku no Temari standing at the doorway. He stared at the Suna princess, watching as her silvery eyes met his own, her lips curled back into something akin to a snarl, seemingly conflicted with herself. Naruto waited patiently, watching Temari as her emotions danced across her face. Emotions like anger, sorrow, and confusion were the most prevalent. But there was something else there, something hidden beneath the obvious. Concern, insecurity, and something else, something he could only relate to the emotions that had been burned into his memory on the face of another woman. On Yoshino's face, whenever she had looked at him. Meeting his eyes again, she spoke, her voice steady and strong, unwavering. Get me to talk with my brother, and I'll tell him what happened. You'll get what you want. Naruto watched her, his silence stretching on for nearly a full minute as he scrutinized her beneath his intense gaze before he slowly nodded his head, watching as she left the room. He couldn't trust her, he knew that. She could be telling him that just to have him drop his guard. He could see the conflict on her expression, which meant she was considering it. It also meant she may hesitate at the last second. He would need to make sure he remained in control of the situation when he brought her out to the field. He resumed the signing of the pages on his desk. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.